let's see. It should be, okay, we're recording. Ben, take it away whenever.
Hello, my name is Ben Martineau, and I'm an advocate with Homeless Voices for Justice. Homeless Voices for Justice is a grassroots organization organized by people who are or have experienced homelessness. We seek to empower people experiencing homelessness and poverty, whose perspectives are often excluded from the development of policies and politics through protest, education, positive policy change, and reform. As part of our annual You Don't Need a Home to Vote campaign, we're interviewing candidates running for local, state, and federal offices on issues that are important to us in our community. Today, we're talking with Councilor Justin Costa, who's running for the Portland City Council at-large seat.
Do you want to ask the first question, Mike? Ben, sorry.
Yep. Can you please introduce yourself to the voters and tell us why you decided to run for city council, or what are your top priorities?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, and good to again. I know we've been doing this a few times in the last couple of months. Yeah, I'm Justin Costa, so I'm a candidate for the at-large seat this year. I'm currently a city representing District 4, Deering, Back Cove, a good part of North Deering, and a good part of Deering Center. But I'm running at large this year for the seat that Jill Dewson is retiring from. Before I joined the council, which was about 6 years ago now, I also spent 6 years on the Portland School Board. So, you know, I'm very familiar with our entire municipal government, how it operates, how budgets work, all of those kind of things. And I think that this is really just an unprecedented time, and the most difficult time that probably the city has faced in many generations. So I think it's really important that we have people in office that sort of know how things work, know all of the different entities that are involved, and all of the different aspects to a lot of complicated issues that we're dealing with. You know, obviously these days we're dealing with a ton of huge issues that are really coming from America at large. So we're dealing with the pandemic, the economic recession, racial justice, homelessness, housing affordability, mental health, substance abuse, all of those kind of issues. So none of that is new, and I don't think that'll be surprising to anyone to sort of name those as major issues that we're facing. But I think the big difference is really how are we going to actually address them and be able to get things done. And I think I've been able to do that in my years in Portland government, and I think it's important that we have people that really know what they're doing from day one this time.
So Sherry, you're up next.
Currently, Portland is experiencing an unsheltered homelessness crisis. There are many reasons why people don't use city shelters, including criminal trespass orders or restrictions, feeling unsafe at the shelter, feeling disrespected by shelter staff, many more. Some people are actually in domestic situations hiding because of they need their safety. There are a lot of reasons why people don't go to the shelter. The city has failed to adequately address these reasons and of why people choose to or are forced to sleep outside. And what will you do to address the unsheltered homelessness in Portland, the situation?
Well, obviously that's a complicated issue, and it's not the same answer for every individual. You know, and obviously from the starting gates, I guess I would say that obviously everything is much more difficult in the time of COVID, which is complicating our ability to run any kind of shelter system safely. But I think there's a couple different elements. One, we know that a system doesn't work for everyone, and we've always had numbers of individuals that don't want to be housed in a shelter system, feel that it doesn't work for them, and that population obviously usually rises in the summer months. So I think we have to figure out ways to work collaboratively to try to address in a more holistic way why it is that some individuals feel that way. Obviously, for some individuals, that's the particular environment. It can be a loss of a sense of community. It can be a feeling that they're not safe in a shelter environment. And there's not an answer to that other than we need to all continue to work together to address individuals' needs. The other major thing I think is, especially COVID, we all need to be communicating effectively to make sure that individuals are aware of the options that are available to them. And I've brought this up every time that we've talked and mentioned in my questionnaire, but we've had tremendous battles over the last several years with first the LePage administration and now some positive changes under Governor Mills to make sure that people experiencing homelessness would be eligible for general assistance. And we need to make sure that all individuals are aware of the fact that that is an option that's available to them, because that is always there to make sure that people are able to have a roof over their heads, access to bathroom facilities and showers, and things like that. So we need to be making sure that that word is getting out to everyone. Clearly, we saw, I think, with some of the encampment this summer, that message was not getting out to all of the individuals, and we were able to successfully place a number of individuals through the GA program. And so I think that that's another important component of it. I'm going to struggle to stay in my 2 minutes here. But I always come back to the thing that I don't think that it's terribly productive to overgeneralize. The issues that belong to them as individuals, and the way that we really address the needs of individuals is to make sure that people have the ability to talk through those issues with everyone, and that we're effectively communicating about what their options are, that they can make informed decisions. So I'll stop there. I'm sure we'll keep hitting on these issues. But.
Go ahead, Carolyn. Yeah, please.
I was just waiting to be called on. While Portland is moving forward with the new centralized homeless services center in Riverton, smaller site shelters have proven to be best practice. Further, COVID has shown us that large congregate settings are impractical and even dangerous. Do you believe that Portland should move forward with the Riverton location, or should it consider changing course to a smaller site, more specialized shelter system?
Honestly, I have mixed feelings about that, and obviously it's a good question. I think you all will probably be aware that I didn't support the move to site the shelter in Riverton. I don't think that's the right location, and I continue to have a lot of concerns about that. At the same time, I think that it is important that we continue to move forward, because what we know, and what was the premise of the previous question, is that the current system is not working for everyone. And I do think it's important for the city as a whole to start to actualize some of these things. We've been talking for years about this, and as I disagree with the final siting decision, we are all trying to move in the direction of creating a better system that's more responsive to people's needs and provides wraparound services and all of those kind of things. So I do think it's important that we continue to move forward on that and not restart the entire conversation, because I just worry that that gets us to nowhere, that that's going to leave us with the current system or lack thereof in place, which we know is inadequate, and it's especially inadequate during the time of COVID, when we know that a lot of the other services that would normally be available during the daytime are not going to be available. So I don't think that's a workable option either. You know, in regards to the scattered shelters, you know, I have to say that I think in the abstract, I'm open to that, but I think I was convinced that it would be very difficult to make that work in the real world. You know, the intent is to try to create a system where people can access services not just from the city itself, but from other organizations that we partner with at one place. And I think it gets very difficult to see how we'll actually be able to make that work if we were to have a number of different sites. You know, it's just going to get increasingly difficult to get partner organizations to be able to also have their staff at multiple different sites. And then independent of that, there is a cost concern. And I think it will be more costly to run a scattered site kind of model. And my worry is that if we get bogged down in that, that's just going to lead to additional delays. And again, that just leaves us with the current system that we know isn't really working. So, you know, there's no easy answer for this. There's nothing that I think addresses everything. But that's sort of my thoughts on that.
So Jim, you're up next.
Okay, well, Councilor Costa, as I'm sure you're aware, advocates with homeless voices for justice have all experienced homelessness. Most of my life, my work as an electrician allowed me to house myself, but it was my struggle with alcoholism that caused me to experience homelessness. I'm glad I've been sober since 2008, so I think I've got that under control. But access to recovery services is important to me. I spent some time as a resident at Serenity House on Mellon Street, which has closed down, and a lot of recovery services have had to either close down or drastically reduce their services. So what is your ideas or thoughts on making recovery services more available to low-income and homeless people?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jim. And it's a complicated one. And so I'm going to avoid the temptation to kind of get too far into the weeds. I think the opportunity that we have, the big opportunity now is, as you guys are well aware, you know, we have had existing partnerships with folks like Milestone, for example, that have generally been effective, but usually the issue has been one of capacity, right? You know, we just don't have enough beds available as a community and that sort of thing. So I think the opportunity that we have now, sort of the answer that I'll try to stop with is we have a huge opportunity now because I think you guys are aware, we hired Bob Fowler from Milestone to come be our new public health. So I literally cannot think of an individual who is better positioned to understand the relationship of city government to partner organizations and specifically to organizations that provide those exact services. So, you know, my honest answer is I want to give Bob enough space to do that work and tell us what he thinks are some of the best ways to expand capacity. Because again, I mean, I don't think that anyone in the community would really suggest anyone other than Bob as the best single person to talk to about a lot of those issues and how to run programming to help people that are affected. So that's the opportunity, and I'm pretty excited actually to see us make progress there.
Ben, you're up next.
Yes, when I was homeless, I already had a housing voucher, but due to the lack of affordable housing, I couldn't put my voucher to use. I spent 5 months homeless. which could have been avoided if there is more affordable housing. What will you do to expand affordable housing in our city, preserve affordable units, and prevent voucher discrimination?
Sure. So let me just touch on the last piece, because this has come up in the past, and I think you guys may or may not remember that I've already voted against voucher discrimination stuff. So I would certainly continue to do that. There's three pieces, and none of them are particularly short term. You know, affordable housing is a very complex issue, obviously. But just sort of in rapid fire, the first thing is we always have to, I think, start with not glossing over the fact that one side of this is economics, right? We just need to get people placed in jobs that are better paid. That's one way that you address affordability, simply because we know that our wages are lower than most of the country. I just want to flag that and then move on to the more direct housing pieces, but that is an important one. The other two things that we really have to do are, one, we have to look at our housing trust fund. You know, this is a fund that we use right now to leverage the creation of more affordable housing units. It's a relatively new thing. You know, the fund itself has literally existed for longer than I've been on the council, but it really hasn't had much money in it until recently because of the inclusionary zoning ordinance that I supported and a variety of other things that are now having people pay fees into that fund. We need to look at that in a couple of ways. One, we just need to do a general examination to say, is this being used effectively to support the development of more affordable housing? The second bigger thing that we have to do with the Housing Trust Fund is we, I think, have to seriously explore the model of what that would look like to do something other than support construction of new units, because that's sort of the box that we're in. You know, the solution from the federal government, the state government, and everyone is we want to build more housing units, and that's certainly helpful, but that's not a short-term solution. So one of the things that I think that we could do is look at what if we wanted to have a more direct support for renters and say, is that a more effective way of getting at the affordable housing issue? Now, running a program like that would certainly be complicated, but I think there are ways that we could at least explore it. So you could piggyback on an existing program. You know, you could say the proof that you qualify for the city's program is simply that you have a Section 8 voucher. And if you have a Section 8 voucher, we're going to give you an extra $100 a month or whatever to also go towards your rent. I think we have to seriously explore that because that gets us out of the box of saying we're going to build new housing, which is very expensive to do, and that's going to be the way to just get more units into the market and try to make housing more affordable for people. And then lastly, the other big thing, just to hit on it broadly, is, you know, we really have to just look at our land use and we have to look at our zoning overall. Making housing more affordable and viable, especially in the short term, is really just about numbers. It's not an ideological thing. It's stuff like you need to talk to people like the Investas of the world that are building housing and say, okay, what are the specifics in your zoning? How far back from the road does your building have to be sited? How much parking do you have to provide? All of those kind of things factor into whether affordable housing development is economically viable for people to build or whether it's not economically viable. So that's literally like a whole committee is dealing just with that, but I do want to flag that as well because it is really important.
Jordan, do you want to take the next question?
My mute button disappeared. Okay, so both COVID-19 and police brutality have shown us that we need to focus on systemic racism in this country. Black, Indigenous, and people of color are overrepresented in both homelessness and poverty, especially here in Portland. What will you do to dismantle systems of systemic racism within Portland's social services, and how will you prioritize the needs of Black, Indigenous, and people of color residents?
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. It's obviously a really important and timely question. You know, so I'll just say a couple of things on that. You know, I am the only Hispanic member of council, the only Hispanic member that has been on the council in a long time. My father was an ELL kid when he grew up. His first language is Spanish. You know, but at the same time, obviously, to most people, especially I pass, you know, for lack of a more politically correct term. So, you know, I feel like I can understand, but there are a lot of complications to it. I think that systemic racism is real. I think that we have seen numerous examples of that over the years, but particularly in this year, how it continues to affect particularly Black people in America. And I think that that's, you know, a travesty of justice, and it's something that all of us are affected by as Americans. I also feel very strongly that if we are serious about addressing issues of systemic racism, we have to be honest about the fact that to really address those things is going to take time. You know, we can't act like you want to address a systemic issue that existed in American society for centuries. To act like we think that the city council in Portland, Maine can show up on some Monday night and I can put a piece of paper in front of people and say, yeah, I support this, and systemic racism is going to go away. That's not how it works. The biggest theme, I guess I would point to in all of this is that Portland has been and is a very progressive city. And so when you look at the words, when you look at policies that we have on the books, there aren't easy solutions to go to. You know, when George Floyd was murdered and we had the initial round of protests and we were having discussions about it, Portland largely has all of the police policies that people want, right? We already do things like, I mean, for one, we actually try to help people that are homeless and experiencing policy. Literally no other city in this country does that. We have, and I helped create, a fund that provides support for people seeking asylum in the city of Portland. No one else does that. And yet, in spite of all of those policy things, we do see disproportionate impacts. We see an enormously disproportionate impact in COVID. We see a disproportionate arrest rate for people of color. And what that should teach us, I think, is that these issues are cultural. They're not based in policy. And because they are cultural, we are going to have to do a long, difficult amount of work as a community to address those things, because it's about implicit bias, not overt policy-based kinds of things. And that's more difficult for people to deal with. So the first big step, and I'm sure I'm way over 2 minutes, is, you know, we created this group to deal specifically with racial equity in the city. And I think we need to then be cognizant of the work that they are going to do, and we need to listen. That is the first thing above all. That we need to listen to what they say, and we need to listen to people that are actually affected, rather than assuming or presuming that we can speak for other people that are affected most by systemic racism in our society. So, I'll stop there. I know I'm way over 2 minutes.
It's okay. So Jim, you have the next question.
Yeah, Yeah, I've been working with Homeless Voice for Justice for 20 years, trying to ensure that people directly impacted are involved in the policy making that affects their lives. One thing that pertains to Portland City Council is that we've negotiated in the past with the Oxford Street shelter so that people staying in the shelter could come up and testify on issues related to homelessness in the shelter and get back there and still have their bed available for them. So what would you do to incorporate unhoused people and people in poverty in your decision making as a city councilor?
Yeah, so a couple of pieces. I'll try to be quicker on this answer. One, just as you guys know, especially since this summer, I've been making a point to reach out. And so I think you continue to do that, and we continue to try to have as open a dialogue as is possible. The other thing I think that is more general, of course, but coming out of COVID is we're all learning how to respond to the world as it is right now. And I think we're going to take away some things. So I think I would love us to get to the point where even when we're back meeting in person again at City Hall and stuff, that we figure out ways to incorporate additional public comment from folks that can't be there, So, I mean, we're doing all of this right now virtually, and there's no reason that, and we've been running our council meetings that way and taking public comment virtually. There's no reason that we can't incorporate that into the way the council does business in the future, which I think will make it a lot more accessible, not just to homeless individuals, but to people that have a whole bunch of other things on, parents that just want to be at home with their kids, from 5:30 to whatever we get done with their meetings these days.
And Carolyn, you have the last question.
If you are elected or re-elected or elected again, I don't know how to phrase it when you're running from a different seat, but in any case, if you are elected to City Council, will you work and vote to uphold the City of Portland's long-standing 35-year commitment to provide emergency shelter to every person in our city who needs it?
Yes.
Well, thank you, Councilor Costa, for taking time to talk with us today. We're excited to share your answers with the community.
Well, thanks very much for having me.